Thank you. Good evening. Do you remember that old word game? Well, it's a game called word association is really what it is. And if I say to you excitement, color, music, balloons, clowns, elephants, tightropes, you say circus, right? You're going to have to come in faster than that. Now, I will say circus, and you say the name of an individual. Which first comes to your mind?
Barnum.
Barnum. P.T. Barnum, of course. After you meet tonight's guest, we can play this game again. I'll say Barnum, and you will say Jim Dale. Or I'll say Jim Dale, and you will say excitement, color, drama, clowns. Do you all get the point of this? Jim has just won the Antoinette Perry Award as Best Actor in a musical for his pyrotechnical performance, there's no other word, in the title role of Barnum on Broadway. He is a comedian who can sing. He's a Shakespearean actor who can juggle and do magic. He's a dancer who can bring tears to your eyes in a love scene. We have persuaded him with all of these talents to begin tonight with a couple of the songs from Barnum. The Colors of My Life and The Prince of Humbug. He's accompanied by Karen Gustafson. So if you'll welcome, please, the incomparable Jim Dale.
The colors of my life are bountiful and bold. The purple glow of indigo, the gleam of green and gold, the splendor of a sunrise, the dazzle of a flame, the glory of a rainbow. I'd put 'em all to shame. No quiet browns and grays, I'll take my days instead and fill them till they overflow with rose and cherry red. And should this sunlit world grow dark one day, the colors of my life will leave a guiding light to show the way. You know, those were the colors of Barnum's life. And he wanted everybody to see a little red and gold. And he also used humbug to do this. Humbug, the ability to take 10 cents away from you and make you smile, as against outright lying to you. And later on in his career, his wife suggests that he gives up this humbug and settle down to a nice, calm life. So he does this, and he takes up politics. And he's standing for one of the political parties, and they take the nomination away from him, as he says, with a lie worse than any humbug I've ever pulled in 35 years of fooling people. He said, I thought I got it out of my life, but I was wrong, because it looks like if I don't humbug them, you know, they're gonna do worse to me. And let's face it, is humbug so bad after all? Look at that shipload of Rubens that came over on the Mayflower. Humbug with a dream of finding some kind of utopia, and that dream of theirs worked out pretty good. Yeah, and Tom Jefferson and Ben Franklin back in '76. Humbug with a dream of finding some kind of free society of equal people, and that dream of theirs was strong enough to win a war. Oh, of course, he says, I'm not comparing live mermaids and four-headed frogs to the Declaration of Independence, but you know, somewhere deep down in there's a connection. And then he laughs, and he says, did you hear that? I haven't lost my touch after all. Up here on a soapbox for 2 minutes, and I've even convinced myself I'm first cousins to Thomas Jefferson. Well, darn it, he says, don't that prove it? At humbugging, I'm the best there is. The Prince of Humbug, balderdash, fiddle, faddle, triple, tosh, twiddle, twaddle, blabber, bosh, bilge, and dodge, and double dutch, and flim, flam. I am the king of hogwash. Tom Tommy Rot, jibber jabber blabber bluff, hocus pocus gabble guff, scam and sham, and just a touch of white lie am I. Duke of tripe and idle chat, Earl of oil, Lord of blat, Emperor of rigmarole, that I am, bless my soul. The Prince of Humbug, poppycock, piffle waffle patter junk, hokum hooey chatterbunk, wile and guile and trumpery, that's me. In this world of sting and shock, this moment we spend down a road of ridge and rock toward Lord knows what end, through a night as cold as space and dark as the sea. Someone's got to make it right, shoot a rocket, shine a light, tell you who the someone's gonna be. The Prince of Humbug, tongue-in-cheek, shilly-shally, pull a wool, blondie, bogus, cock and bull, hoax and prank and hanky-pank and some skullduggery. I am and am, I'll always be. Thank you.
You've got to try to put a little energy into your work.
I have to somewhere.
Yes, for a man who's described his own voice as asthma set to music, I think you did. You certainly do. You do well with the song. Well enough, I'd say, to get you a job.
Oh, it's great fun. Those songs are beautiful.
Yeah.
There's such contrasting ones. You know those two numbers, the Colors of My Life, beautiful.
Yeah.
And then this exciting number. There's no reference for these words. Have you noticed? It's so difficult to remember that I can't associate them. Piffle, waffle, patter, junk, hokum, hooey. And then halfway through rehearsals, the writer would say, we'll put another piffle waffle instead of the hokum hooey.
And
Why?
Do you ever get them sideways and still
Upside
have it
down
come out even?
occasionally, yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's the type of song that you can literally improvise on every night.
And still get
And
away
still
with
get
it.
away with it, yeah.
I wondered if there would be enough left of you during the day, which we happen to be taping during now, to do a show, because you use up more energy, I guess, than everybody else on Broadway put together in each performance, I would think. Was there any time during rehearsals or anything where you just said, look, you're nobody, even Jim Dale, who in Scapino, you established yourself as somebody who could do 25 things in one night and survive?
Well, I had a problem like that, not in this show. There was another show I did in England called The Card, which was very exhausting. And I said, look, please, it's 3 hours on stage. Yeah. You've got to allow me to go to the men's room at least once, or at least give me an opportunity of being able to go. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, can we suggest we put a screen on, a low screen, and perhaps we got some sort of bowl behind, because we'd like you to look over the top and keep talking at the same time. Would you believe it? And that was a serious suggestion.
Did the stagehands refuse to empty the bowl, or what became of that?
It never got around to that. I just sort of held my breath for a while.
Or whatever it is. How much risk and danger is there each night in this performance? I would think just from trivial things like breaking an ankle or turning one to
there are lots of accidents that can happen in this show. It can be excitement that creates it. There was an accident 2 or 3 nights ago, and one boy broke a bone in his foot, tripping over something on the way off. The next night, there he is on stage, leaping and landing on that trampoline thing.
How?
With determination. You know, he just strapped his foot up and went on. Accidents can happen if you panic.
Yeah.
Nobody should panic, not when you can injure yourself. We all rely upon each other for the safety out there. You know, we have people, spotters, they're called. These are the guys who stand underneath in case you miss your footing, and you're going to land on them.
But the traffic on that stage and the tricky choreographing of moves and the fast, dangerous-looking stuff, it's quite thrilling to watch.
It is, because everybody knows their own crisscross pathways, you know, and it's only when a newcomer walks on and suddenly is hit like that. It's as though a train has hit them. They don't quite know what's happening. Yeah. And we had that happen once or twice. But it makes you realize how dangerous the circus is when it is on such a larger scale than, Barnum. Barnum is all on one stage, and we can control it very well.
Now, there's one thing in this that can't have been in your repertoire before you did this show. Tightrope.
Oh, no, that wasn't in at all. It was a necessary piece of business to keep ahead of the kids in the show. You know, those are all brilliant individuals who can do everything. I mean, we selected them from 450 wonderful, talented people you have here in the States, all connected with the circus. We have the ex-world champion baton twirler, who is brilliant.
The woman who does the...
Yes, Sophie.
Unbelievable.
You know, I mean, she can throw this baton up 30, 40 feet and do a flying forward somersault and catch it behind her back. I mean, wonderful.
And juggle 3 at one point. Maybe you haven't seen that. It's behind you.
Yes, and there was another, Eddie, is a brilliant juggler, and he said, I juggle 5 balls.
Yeah.
I said, well, that sounds great. He can juggle 6. And Eddie said, yeah, but I set fire to mine before I juggle and wear asbestos gloves.
Oh, yeah.
Would you believe it? You know, he can juggle anything, and we have the greatest talent. I'd love to list all of them individually, but you saw the show.
Yeah, it's hard to...
None of them are jealous, you see. They of each other. They are so innocent. They are wonderfully talented individuals.
Yeah.
And we can go to each one of them and say, please teach me a little of what you do.
How many objects can you juggle now? I know you do some...
About 3, that's all.
Yeah.
There's a school in Switzerland that teaches juggling, and for the first month you only juggle 1.
What does that mean?
Well, just 1, because anybody can do this, you know,
Yeah.
but to learn to juggle 1 and make it look beautiful takes a lot of determination.
I want to
a lot
go
of
there.
teaching.
I've always wanted to
The
know
second
that.
month you juggle with 2, third month only 3.
Yeah.
So it shows just how much. We have a guy in the show, Terry, who can juggle 1 ball, and he does it with 2 of the girls on the stage. It makes it look so beautifully balletic.
There's a... in tightrope walking, there must be some sort of special breathing you do. I think I read that somewhere.
Yes.
What does that mean? Why is that necessary?
It's to remind you to concentrate. It's like a boxer when he's belting, you know, that whatever it is, and all this. Then occasionally I fall off the wire, but when I'm walking on the wire and I'm trying to concentrate, and so many things can make you lose your concentration. A flashlight goes off down there, and now you're suddenly blinded.
Yeah.
And this is why we have to ask the audience very politely, please refrain from taking photographs, you know, because
Sure.
it is dangerous. A juggler throws something up, flashlight, and it lands on someone else's head, you know.
At the ballet, they ask you not to take flash pictures, but I've never heard it asked in the...
Well, there's many dangerous things happening, and once you're on the wire, I have to concentrate breathing, with my breathing, to remind me I'm up there. And now, of course, in the show, I don't just have to do the breathing, I have to do the singing at the same time, so it gets a little complicated.
Have you checked your weight fore and aft of a performance?
No, I haven't. I've been told not to. I would have a shock. I would go into shock, I was told.
Really?
But I took my costume off after about the first night, and my dresser, Harry Edwards, and I just decided to wring it out to see what would happen, and a puddle formed on the floor.
Of former Jim Dale?
Former Jim Dale. It's all in a puddle down there. Yeah.
Well, your fans are fanatical. You could bottle that and sell it.
Isn't that
Because you know there's a sucker born every minute.
Hey, I never thought of that.
I just thought of that. I'm going to put that down. Jot that down.
Jot it down.
You might be able to use it. You were so many things. I wonder which one you're gladdest to be rid of. Disc jockey, rock singer. Were you really a rock singer in the full, rock star in the full out sense of...
An accident, a sheer accident. I borrowed a guy's guitar. His name was Tommy Steele. I borrowed Tommy's guitar and I sang to an audience who were ready to watch Tommy Steele in a sort of Don Krishna's rock concert show that we had in England 20 years ago. And afterwards they said, great, we'll see you next week. I said, I don't have a lot more material. They said, forget the material, you're singing on the show.
You were just horsing around?
I was horsing around doing an Elvis Presley number.
Yeah.
And luckily I could strum the guitar, I can't play it. And so I became a regular singer on the show. George Martin, who eventually recorded the first Beatles, saw me and thought, well, if this nut is going to be on the show every week, we might just as well cash in on it, so we'll record him. Luckily, the song got into the top 20, and now suddenly I'm back in the same theaters. Now I'm top of the bill. 2 or 3 months before that, I had been there as a young comedian, second spot, just after the chorus girls. And now suddenly I'm back there, and they're screaming their heads off. And you think, well, why weren't you here months ago? You know, and what have I gained in 2 months that I didn't have then? And the answer is nothing. You're screaming at what you thought would be a bejeweled sequin monster bounding out playing rock. Instead, you get a guy just dressed like this. Let's play it for laughs. And that's what I did for 2 years. Now and then I would take the guitar off and say, did you hear the joke about the fellow? And they'd say, get it back! And I'd put it back on quickly. Singing, no time for comedy.
You can see why the comedian resents the rock act on a bill, then now,
Yes.
can't you, from both sides?
Oh,
because
absolutely.
the comic goes, if he writes his own act, knocks himself out, goes out, tries it, gets maybe medium reaction, and a real crap act will come out with a guitar and just steal the show.
Mm-hmm. Well, I knew that they'd be screaming twice as loud at some other nut the next week, so I did play it for laughs, and the older people in the audience realized this. And I had a lot of fun, and I decided eventually to give it all up completely, to concentrate on what I was trained to do and what I wanted to do, not what they wanted me to do. The worst words that can ever be thrown at you are the words, if I were you, I would.
Yeah.
You know, and if you take that advice all through your life, you're never going to get anywhere. Now and then you have to say, no, I'm doing what I want to do, and it won't be as much money, it won't be as much security, but I just want to go onto a little television show and learn my trade as a comedian. And I did that for 2 years, 3 years, with a man who is on Broadway at the moment. His show is on, Night in the Ukraine. His name's Dick Vosborough. Yeah. And Dick wrote 600 sketches for me for Southern Television in England. And we did 2 sketches a show, 3 shows a week for 2 years. You know, and that's the experience that I had to get, rather than standing there night after night singing like Elvis Presley.
Well, at what point were you a disc jockey in all this?
Oh, the BBC asked me to do a children's disc jockey show. And so I said, well, can I just improvise? They said, no, you have to do it. You have to have all the scripts censored. And I was literally sacked because I put in an ad lib, and they didn't like it.
Was it filthy?
I don't think it was filthy. I said I said, before the next record, I'd just like to mention that in Africa, there are over 7 million pygmies, all on the short side. So you say, what's this got to do with the next record? Well, nothing, but just goes to show it's a small world. That's all I said. And they asked, that was it. That was it. It wasn't in the script, therefore you're out.
Well, if they lost the pygmy viewing audience or listening audience, of course, they would be in trouble. And so you have to try to see.
Somebody complained from the African embassy, you know, and that was it. The BBC have to watch their image abroad. But that was fun, because you never know. There might come a time when you're asked to play the part of a disc jockey. Now I know exactly what it is. And I think if you're going to be in this business, you know, concentrate on every branch of showbiz tree. And at least explore it. You may be terrible at it, but you've learned a lesson, which is probably not to even attempt that again. But at least you've learned something from it.
You wrote the music for the film Georgie Girl, including
I wrote
the song of the same name, or the lyrics?
I wrote the lyrics for the film and for the song, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was fun. A hobby, again,
Well,
which...
I have to thank you for an irritating month where I couldn't get that song out of my head.
I'm thrilled to bits, thank you. Yeah.
You don't get royalties when it runs through someone's head,
No, that's a pity,
No,
isn't
has to
it?
be.
It's a pity.
Yeah. To what extent are people seeing the P.T. Barnum of historic accuracy when they see the show?
I think everybody has an idea of what P.T. Barnum looked like. Maybe fortunately for me, we don't have videotape of what the guy was like. I think we're allowed to have our own image of him. I'm playing P.T. Barnum the way that I think he was up here. The spirit of the man. The spirit of the man was fun. The boy man he was. He never grew up, and he loved what he was doing. And what I'm trying to create on stage is the excitement that must have been going on in this man's mind. We have hundreds of instances of the way he humbugged people. Unfortunately, we can only have a few in the show, but this man's mind never stopped. And so it's literally, that's what I have to do. Move all the time. It's the motor in his brain that keeps him going. He wants to take a risk with Jenny Lind. What's the bigger risk than walking a tightrope between his marriage and Jenny Lind? So, all right, put the tightrope up. That's what he was doing in his mind when he did it.
Have you given any thought to whether he was unethical in that?
Yes, of course. Yes, I think
the...
he must have been one of the biggest con men ever.
Sure.
But he made it sort of respectable. He didn't take thousands from you. He took For instance, he said, there's a free I've got a free show for everybody in Manhattan. It's in the fields of New Jersey next Sunday. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to have a buffalo hunt. So bring your kids and bring your husbands and wives and bring your friends and bring your picnic, and you're going to see a big buffalo hunt. And 200,000 people crossed the ferry and sat in this field watching or waiting for the buffalo hunt. And about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 of the tiniest, raggiest, scruffiest looking buffalo were herded into this field, and 3 or 4 tired old cowboys pretended to lasso them. And the crowd fell about. This is what they'd spent their Sunday waiting for. And afterwards, they'd finished their picnic and they got on the ferry and came back to Manhattan.
You mean they were amused? They didn't try to...
It didn't cost them anything.
They didn't try to lynch Barnum for this?
No, except they didn't know for that one day Barnum had bought up all the ferry boats and made something like $4,000 for doing nothing.
Which
that was in
40,000
1850.
in those days.
That was in 1850. They all paid 10 cents to cross the ferry and 20 cents to get back, or something like that.
That's the sort of genius that has made this country great, I must say. I did a lot of research about you, and I know that you come from a wealthy country family.
That's absolutely true, yes.
Related, in fact, to the royal family. Is Her Majesty ever embarrassed at what's...
No, she's very happy at the way that one of her meager subjects is behaving now. Yes, you know, one of the original Smiths I was. It's beautiful, yeah. Whether my great-great-grandfather was a silversmith, a blacksmith, or a jacksmith, I don't know what, but...
Had to be some kind of smith for you to have that name.
Oh, of course, yes.
The truth is that you come from a foundry sort of town,
yeah.
Isn't it? I picture
It's a small town where if you live in the town, you have to work in that area. And of course, in the old days when there was no transport to take you 50 or even 10 miles away, you had to find work in that area. And my father was a steel foundry worker, and he worked all his life in a steel foundry. And I don't know where he knew. When I suggested that I wanted to go on the stage to be a comedian, my father, who lived his life in black sand, molding in one of these foundries, said to me, he said, well, you have to learn to move, Jim, on the stage. And I think you should take up dancing lessons.
How did he know this?
How did he know? I don't know. And for the next 6 years, I did tap, I did ballet, I did everything. And my mum and dad paid not a lot of money, because it wasn't a lot in those days, but they paid a lot out of their own pocket for this. And I don't quite know where Dad got the idea that you had to move. I mean, this was the most wonderful advice. It taught me, people say, why do you use your hands so much? I was trained to do that, and it's a result of the encouragement that Mum and Dad gave me all those years ago.
You would expected him to have said, well, that's a silly idea, so I can see why a young man would have that, but in fact, you have to learn how to make money
That's right.
and with your hands, and so few people make it in the theater anyway, and so on.
No, he said, try it. And that's one of the greatest things that you can say to your own children, you know.
I wonder if they had denied you, if they'd taken the opposite view, would you have gone ahead anyway? Do you think you were...
I knew it. You know, it's an instinct that you have, that you want to do something with your life, and it doesn't matter what age that instinct hits you, or the instinct comes upon you. I knew when I was 9.
Was there a moment when you knew? Did you see a...
Yeah, it was a moment when I went to a theater and I sat in the second balcony and I was watching a guy on stage being very funny and making everybody laugh, and I had never heard the laughter before, and I wanted to be him. So that's what I wanted to be. And my father said...
You can remember that was it. That was where the chord struck, and
that's
you
right.
knew you were going to...
I'd always clowned about. I used to. My first concert was on a bus going to the seaside. From my little town to the seaside. They used to get everybody to do something. And at the age of 8 or 9, I was doing terrible, we call them monologues. Over here, a monologue is a series of jokes, but in England, a monologue are rhyming jokes.
What?
Rhyming lines, you know, and it's a complete story of the Battle of Hastings or Richard I, Coeur de Lion, you know, and you have these rhyming couplets.
And every other line, I mean, it's...
Yeah.
How would one begin?
Well, it would be... in England, an apartment block are called flats.
Sure.
All right, it's better explain that. There was one verse that The force of the bang was horrific. Every man was blown out of his shoes, and a block of tall flats by the side of the road caught the blast and were turned into mews. I mean, lovely rhymes like this. Now, you know, it went on for hours.
Yeah.
You used to sort of make them up. And
Well, how successful was your stand-up comedy act?
Terrible.
I gather that some of the merchandise at Covent Garden was thrown on
terrible.
stage.
Then I realized why Dad told me to keep moving. Yes, it was a very bad one. Nobody wrote their own material. You see, American comedians improvise and make up their own material. We don't in England. Our material is, there was this man walking down the street, blah, blah, and we do a joke. And it's not our joke. It's the joke I heard you tell last night. And I've stolen it from you. But today, it's mine because I'm first on.
I see.
You know, and
Whoever
this is
gets out there first.
Whoever got there first was...
And if two of you are on the same bill, the guy has to stand backstage crossing out
That's
parts of
right.
his act.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Oh, we have such fun. In England, there was a young comedian who was a very blue comedian, making his first appearance in one of the clubs. And his material was so filthy.
Yeah.
And the owner of the club came up and said, look, I've heard about your material. And if you go on that stage in front of this family audience with their children, their loved ones out there, and if you come out with one blue joke, I am going to drop that curtain on you, and you will never, ever work in the north of England again. You've been warned. And walked away, leaving this poor kid not knowing what to do.
That's all he had.
He couldn't think of one clean joke. He didn't know any. And he was standing in the wings, perspiring, and he heard the MC, the same guy, go out and say, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure now to welcome to our club one of the great new comedy merchants of our time. A young boy from the north of it. You are going to love him. But before he comes out, did you hear the joke about, and he told the filthiest joke you have ever heard? The audience fell about with laughter, and then he said, please, no, no, no. Let's leave the comedy to the real comedians. Ladies and gentlemen. And then he introduced the kid. Can you imagine?
Incredible.
And the kid's career went straight down. I know that's the life in the north of England now. The big clubs in the north of England. You know, they don't come to hear you. They come to eat their scampi and French fries. You know, and to play the gambling tables.
And they tolerate you if you're lucky.
Yes. Luckily, mine was a different audience. Mine was a theater audience in those early days. And that's where you can learn your trade.
Jim, I got to raise a delicate question with you. We're out of time, and we haven't even used 4 kilowatts of your energy. Can you stay a little longer, and we'll use up some more?
Love to.
I mean, we'll pretend that it's tomorrow night's show.
Love to.
In fact, to you at home, it will be. Can you do that?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, Jim Dale, tonight and tomorrow. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Good night.
Funding for the Dick Cavett Show has been provided by this station and other public television stations, and by a grant from the Chubb Group of insurance companies. The program has been provided by this station and other public television stations, and by a grant from the Chubb Group of insurance companies.
Good evening. I persuaded my guest from last night to stay over, and that's why we're already sitting here. I'm sure you understand. And there's a man in the theater now who is a legend at a very early age. His name is Jim Dale, and in a couple of things he has appeared in, he has created the impression that there is nothing he cannot do. If he isn't careful, they'll test him on that someday, but I don't know which test he would fail. He's proved to be a marvelous performer in singing, dancing, acting, juggling, can play most known instruments, it seems. He can fall beautifully. He can stand well. He can make you cry. I'm going to ask him to demonstrate all of these in the next couple of moments. He hit like a cyclone in New York and appeared in Shakespeare and knockabout comedies and farces. And by this time, you know that I'm talking about the star of Barnum now on Broadway, the remarkable, incredible Jim Dale. Well, maybe you're credible.
All we can say now is good night. What an intro. Thank you.
Okay, kid, let's see you follow that one.
How can anybody? That's smashing. Thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
Boy.
I think probably we should now discuss the
serious,
writings of Herman Melville.
Yes, or world problems, yeah.
Actually, Herman Melville isn't totally irrelevant to Barnum,
I
is
was
it?
hoping you'd get into this, yes.
Yeah, The Confidence Man. The title of...
That's right, yes.
Was that really in any sense based on Barnum himself, the man Barnum?
I suppose every confidence man sort of reads about some other person who's been successful in that particular field.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could very well have had Barnum in mind. I think a lot of impresarios today on Broadway have Barnum in mind.
Yes,
Quite a few of them.
and subscribe to the theory about suckers being born.
There are, but yes, absolutely.
You appeared in vaud, as some people call it, in vaudeville over in England.
That's right.
And in fact, vaudeville, or vaudeville, as it's also pronounced by some older comic, lasted right up into the present time in some ways, or at least it lasted a lot longer in England than it did over here.
Yes, it was called music hall over there.
Yeah.
And that was exciting to do. It was a different bill every week. You never knew who you were going to be on the bill with. You'd arrive at the theater on Monday morning for the band call and suddenly realize there's an old friend there you hadn't seen for 2 years. If there wasn't an old friend, you'd made friends with the other people by Thursday. And come Saturday, you all said goodbye and probably never met up again for another 2 years.
Yeah.
It was a different theater every week, different Sunday concert, a different theater for Sunday concerts. The greatest experience you could ever have, but that sort of faded out in the 50s due to bingo and especially television studios buying up the theaters in these towns.
So they're not...
The only places that do stay open still are the ones at the end of the pier during the summer season. We don't have summer stock over here, which are big, big shows. We have smaller shows that are on the end of the pier, like The Entertainer, Lawrence
That's what
Olivier.
brings to mind, yeah, it's seen in Olivier and The Entertainer. That, certainly one of his great performances as that seedy comic, Archie Rice. And I gather you probably, you worked with real-life Archie Rices.
Yes, a few of them in their younger years, yes, but you knew they were going to become Archie Rices while you were working with them. Their material never varied. They themselves didn't have the ambition or the push that was necessary to take them out of this. They did pantomime, you see. The pantomime at Christmas in England lasts for about 12 weeks, and then you do summer season, that lasts another 12. So that's half the year you're working. The rest of the time you can relax.
Pantomime there means something different here. You think of someone with a white face pretending to thread a needle or something.
Yeah, well, pantomime in England is such a wonderful place to take the kids every year. Every town has this particular type of show, and they all try to outdo each other with it. Let's see, you've got Puss in Boots, you've got Sleeping Beauty, you've got all these stories.
That's called pantomime.
Pantomime, yes, and there was a very famous one that we heard about that was Alibaba and the 40 Thieves with a cast of 12. Now, you got to go and see this. So we went along there.
Wrong there.
No, we went along there on the opening night. It was a small town. And the pianist was in the pit, and the curtains opened up to this terrible tatty set. And this man walked out. And it was obviously the star. None of us knew him. He was a big local personality. And this was Alibaba. And he called off to the wings. He said, "Abdullah, my second in command, come here. The other 39 of you, stay where you are." And you never saw them. Every time they were mentioned, they were always waiting out there. You never saw. And then we realized the cast of 12 included stage management, dressers. There were about 4 people in this 2.5-hour show.
It's a little Barnum-like itself, isn't it?
It's
a hoodwinkery aspect of it.
That's it.
Yeah. I gathered you a variety of dialects, and I'm wondering what it sounded like in your hometown. If I were to go there, would I understand the people? We mentioned last night that you came from a town where you worked in the foundry.
My brother came over last week, from the town, never been to America before. And he started to talk to the people in his own accent. He didn't try he thought everybody could understand him, and of course it was so difficult for him to understand Americans as well.
Sure.
The way he was talking, I'll give you an example. I'll start talking with the accent, which is very broad.
Okay.
Right, and he started talking like this, me doc, you see, and he thought that everybody knew what he was talking about. Of course, nobody did. But of course, they had some sort of idea about it all, but they didn't. None of them quite knew what exactly he was talking about, like.
Which sounds all right to me.
Now, when I was a young boy, when I was 16, I used to admire my headmaster's accent. I used to think, oh, I wish I could speak like this man. His accent is wonderful. I met him when I was about 18. I'd left home by this time and toured into the big world about 50 miles away. And I came back and I saw him in the street and I said, "You remember me, sir?" He said, "Here, how are you, me doc?" Me doc, lovely to see you again. And I thought, can you understand how I spoke? I mean, so that's a very broad accent. But the interesting thing about that accent, Dick, is that it comes from Shakespeare country. And in Shakespeare's day, when he put on the plays, the accents, the local dialects were as they are today. Dialects don't travel. That's why they stay where they are, because in those days there was no travel. People spoke that way because the word of mouth hadn't spread with motor cars. You get in a car and drive 100 miles away and you'll hear different accents.
What area of England was that?
Northamptonshire.
Which is the north of
Which is
England?
it's about 80 miles north of England, but when you had
That's
no
all?
transport, that's 2,000 miles.
Can be another world.
So Shakespeare's comics and clowns must obviously have, or his actors, spoken with this accent that I had. And so I decided to use it at the Edinburgh Festival, playing Bottom in Midsummer Night's Dream. And the reviews were very, very good, but all of them said, where in God's name did Dale get this ridiculous accent? And it was the authentic one that...
All they had to do was go 18 miles north and they could
That's
hear
right.
it.
But it's so difficult to speak that nobody tries to copy it on television in the soap operas, you know.
I wonder how they account for the fact that in such a small island there would be literally several, I think, 100 dialects.
It is obviously because people didn't travel. They
Some
traveled to
dominant
the
personality spoke that way or in the town and everybody else did.
I
Or
don't
what, I
know.
wonder how an accent really starts. No one's
See,
ever
they have
been
a
able to answer
market
that.
town. All the villages go to their nearest market town, and for hundreds of years, that's as far as they ever travel.
Sure.
So accents develop and stay, and dialects develop and stay in that one area.
But no one's ever been able to explain to me why that dialect started in that town and not this one, and vice versa.
That's right.
You know,
But it's very easy to understand where the American accent came from. When you listen to Devon and Somerset, they all start talking like this down there. And now these are the people who came over to America in the early days there. And there's the beginning of the American accent there.
But then why did another accent develop when they got over here? Why did it change? Why didn't it stay the same?
So many people hearing so many other people talking.
Yeah. But your father spoke that way, of course.
That's right.
And also, if he were speaking with the Queen, would they understand each other?
No. He'd probably accept an invitation, which was, in her words, get out. You know, he wouldn't be able to understand.
What's the upperest class accent like? I suppose what the Queen sounds like.
That's a very good accent she has, but then, of course, we have lots of an accent in England, which is an affected accent. And even we laugh at this. I mean, this is the one that we ridicule. The English are the greatest at ridiculing themselves.
Let me guess at what it sounds like. Is it this one? Because this is the one that sounds funniest to me. Hello, I wonder if you could do me a tremendous favor.
That's right. First of all, absolutely.
Is that it?
Yes, what you do is you talk through your nose, first of all, and you show a lot of teeth like that. That is an affected accent.
And the people with that accent tend to use words like incessant, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Which
yes.
ends in Y, but sounds like yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
they go to a place called, pronounced or spelled S-P-I-N. They go to Spin for a holiday.
Was it Madrid in
South
Spain?
of Spin. Spin, yes.
And yet you take an actor like Michael Caine, he can play a variety of things, and yet he has a distinct sound of what area?
Cockney, London, yes.
That's right, with the Bow Bells.
But he has another distinct thing. Michael Caine, he only speaks in 3 words at one time. I was born in East London a long time ago, and I remember...
Wonderful. You know what's not clear to me is how you made the transition from this variety of lives of disc jockey, rock star, and magician, stand-up comic, and all of that. It's not entirely clear to me how you then got into National Theatre in London. The word about is that Olivier discovered you, but he didn't see you performing on the street corner or something.
No, he saw me doing Shakespeare at the Edinburgh Festival, but the guy who got me up to the Edinburgh Festival was the director, Frank Dunlop, who I collaborated with later on. Frank asked me to play the part of Autolycus in The Winter's Tale, and when I said, no, thank you, I'm musical, he said, well, Shakespeare had his comedians. And I said, well, I don't really want to play Shakespeare. I'm not interested in it. I don't know anything about that side of show business. Yeah. And he said, well, please try it. You never know what you know, and that's the challenge. So
Did you know that
it.
part when he mentioned it?
No, never heard of it.
What kind of character it was?
Never heard of it. But finally, I went on that stage dressed as Autolycus, and I walked into the front, and I said, my name is Autolycus, which was an introduction. So it's straight to the audience. And then I heard laughter from a Shakespeare audience, which was identical to the laughter from a music hall audience, and from then on, it was Shakespeare.
It's clear sailing.
I knew that if Shakespeare had written these parts, as he had, for people to perform and get laughed, then I thought I could contribute my personality to that, and perhaps make something of all the roles, the comedy roles. And so I made a point of trying to play most of the comedy roles of Shakespeare over the next few years.
If somebody had said to you, you will someday share the stage with Laurence Olivier when you were still working in the music hall or that sort of thing, would you have said you're mad?
I would said you're mad unless he comes in vaudeville, you know, and joins us on the stage there singing. Yeah. But no, I never expected that, and it was one of the greatest joys of my life, being able to be directed by Laurence Olivier. Yeah. And to actually appear on stage with him. I played Lancelot Gobbo to his Shylock in The Merchant of Venice.
Did you play it in Edinburgh when you went up there?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Then you're who I saw.
I am?
I thought so.
Really?
That's where I saw it.
With Derek Jacobi and yes.
Yep. What was the bet you had with Olivier one night about a line getting a laugh or not getting a laugh? Do you know that's...
Well, we were at rehearsal. Yeah. We were at rehearsal, and I was playing Costard in Love's Labour's Lost, and it was a revival. And Laurence Olivier had directed the original one. And I was playing the clown, and he said, right, you're on the floor in this scene now. I want you to stand up and do the lines. And my instinct came out and said, well, what do you mean? It won't get a laugh. And he said, I want you to stand up. I'm directing the play. You stand up. It never gets a laugh. I said, because you're getting me to stand up. That's why it doesn't get a laugh. If you let me stay down there, it'll get the... He said, are you trying to tell me how to get a laugh? I said, no, but I'm just saying that the... And I thought, oh, dear, I'm in deep water here, because you don't tell Laurence Olivier where the laugh is. He said, look, we have never had a laugh in this part. I said, well, I'll bet you. If you leave me there, I bet I get a laugh. I don't know what, I bet him a bottle of wine or something. He said, okay, you're on. And that was a wonderful way of... If it hadn't have got a laugh, he would have said, I told you, do it my way. Yeah. But he couldn't fail. It was a line that could get a laugh. So why not try it both ways? And I loved the night that I went out for the first time, tripped over while I was in a boat, a little boat around me, fell on the floor, and everybody held their breath, because this was the big moment. Yeah. And I did the line facing the audience, flat on my face, and it brought the house down.
Did you get a bottle of wine?
I got a bottle of wine, I think.
Is there a principle to falling on stage that not everyone should try it? And I always wanted to be an acrobat or do everything dangerous that I've ever seen anybody do and on stage. And I used to love to fall out of trees, off of things.
Yeah.
And,
it's not the fall that's hurt you, it's a sudden thud as you hit the ground. That can be damaging.
The striking part.
The striking part, yes. You know, elbows, everything smashed to pieces over the years. But that's the way you learn not to do it that way.
Yeah.
Then you go on to other things. Tumbling is a thing that I did from the age of 16. From the age of 9 to 16, I did a lot of tumbling, and also included it in the vaudeville act. Yeah. If there was a flight of steps, I would fall down it. If there was anything that I could trip over, I would trip over.
Just
to get a laugh. And if they didn't laugh, then I would deliberately limp on my way off to make them think I was a cripple. And so I got sympathetic applause.
Now they're sorry. Could you show me how to fall over on the edge of that stage when I'm making an entrance, just so the day when a guest does, I'll be prepared for it?
Oh, sure. All right.
Really?
Yep.
Or what would be the better place? I mean, your expert eye would probably know.
I don't know. Let's put something here. Here it is. That's what you got to look for.
Uh-huh.
All right?
Give us a moment to get our cameras
Okay.
in position. Because
Well, I'm coming on.
Here.
Right, I'm going to walk straight across the stage, but when you get to the box, you see certain things.
Jim.
Please, here. Here, let me help stop the flow. Probably. Well, that did give me a turn. Ooh, that's probably the best fall I ever saw. For heaven's sake,
you
don't
imagine,
try
though-
that at home.
Imagine what happens when you do a fall like that and they're not prepared for it.
Yeah.
That's fun. You know, this is lovely. You were prepared. You knew I was going to fall there, but it's lovely to make an entrance into a room. And you do that. I actually did that in a show once. I said, please introduce me. And what happened, we didn't rehearse it, but it was so lovely because I walked on the stage, tripped, fell flat on the floor, and there was a deadly hush. And slowly, 2 stagehands walked on and picked me up and carried me off. And the announcer said, Jim might be appearing later on in the show. Let's get on with it. Like to introduce now. And of course, when I did come out later on, it brought the house down because I stepped around that area that I tripped over before.
It was that convincing. That was really scary.
I love fun like this. I saw a comedian, and I'm not stealing his material, but his entrance was wonderful in Los Angeles. He's a brilliant comedian at the Comedy Store. And they said, here he is. Where is he? And they said, he's at the bar. They said, well, bring him on. And this guy walked through the audience, obviously drunk. He had a can of beer, a long can of beer. And he walked onto the stage and stood there for seconds, just looking at the audience, who by this time were getting aggravated. And said, come on, come on. And he hunched his shoulders, and he started to drink. And he drank, and he drank, and he finished the tin. And everybody was ridiculing him. Yes, that's good. And then he put the tin across his hand.
The can, we say.
The can, yeah?
All right.
And he went smash. And he just squashed it against his forehead. And he peeled it off, this big ox of a man, and threw it on one side. And then he was standing there, peeled it off like that, really showing his strength. He said, ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to say how, and did the same thing, crashed on the floor, they picked him up and took him off. I mean, it's lovely moments of comedy like that. I love it.
There's a comic, and I think his name is Jack Durant, who comes out
I love him.
throws his arms out hits one note, and without doing anything to break his fall, falls straight backwards onto his back at full length on a nightclub floor. And I don't know how in the world he does that. Somehow the fall must be, well, it's like revealing.
Yep.
But your slap took I hope, took most of the...
Oh yeah, the arms there take the fall.
Brother, that was a good one.
I love to see it when you do a flying forward somersault on a floor like this and you skid, and you see the metal poles. There's a metal pole there. If you have a ring on your hand as you're sliding towards it, as you get to it, you hit the ring against the metal pole, and it's as if your head has hit it, and the effect is so wonderful. We had one of the Barnum and Bailey clowns come to the theater, a young boy who was so brilliant at this, and he had me on the floor laughing. I couldn't believe that anybody could tumble as well as this young boy. Absolutely marvelous. Anybody who can do that with their body, I admire them so much.
Yes. Are you going to go on doing this sort of thing until you're 95? Or are you going to be 95 in a few weeks from doing this?
That's a good statement. I don't know. It's physically, there are certain things you can still do, obviously, when you're much older. I don't know. I've never even thought of it. If it's a challenge, I'll do it. I've never even considered something being so exhausting that I think it will show at rehearsals, Dick. You know, you say, hey, come on, look, you know, I need a break. I can't do this forever.
And a part doesn't have to be totally physical for it to attract you, does it? There was that play, Whose Life Is It Anyway, where only the actor's head showed. He was paralyzed.
That's right.
And he was on stage the whole time without moving.
Oh, there's just as much challenge there. The challenge is not moving.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I was asked to do that a long time ago, but I had Barnum in the works, and it's no good practicing for Barnum all day long, you know, and then playing a role like Whose Life Is It?
Sure.
I think it might be fun to make a musical of that. I mean, can you imagine the relaxation that you would get from that part? Being pushed around by tap dancers? Wonderful.
Did you ever have someone ejected from a theater one time? Is that an apocryphal story? A man who had fallen asleep or was doing something?
The only thing...
A spectator thrown out once?
Well, I heard a story that's supposed to happen at St. James. I don't know whether it's true, that they came in for the second house, and there was a man lying across 3 seats. And the public were coming in to sit down, and this guy was taking up 3 seats. And the guy said, do you mind? These are my seats. And the guy went, And they thought, this guy is a nut. He's got to be, or he's ill. He's ill. He is. And they called the lady who runs the theater, and they said, we think he's ill. And she said, are you all right? They said, well, maybe he's not even English. Where do you come from? Where do you come from? Said, the balcony. So anyway, get back to...
Hope he knew how to fall.
No, I didn't. I don't think I've ever had anybody thrown out of the theater. What happened was that there was a man. I was doing Scapino, and I had a huge salami in my hand that I used to hit people with on the stage. And they said to me while I was waiting to make another leaping across the... I used to leap on the backs of the seats and run across the audience into the auditorium. And they said, there's a guy fast asleep with a big smile on his face in the second row. I said, really? Nobody sleeps when I'm on. Nobody. Listen how you're laughing now. I leaped on that stage, and I leaped off the stage, landed on the back of the first row, and I swiped, knocked him out of his seat into the aisle, and I went running across the rest of the seats, and 5 minutes later I'm off, and I said, did you see that? Ooh, straight into the aisle. Boy, he's not sleeping when I'm on. And they said he wasn't asleep. I said, of course he was. I said, no. He was blind. There, you see, that's the... 1 minute you're laughing at that, you see, and that's what we were doing. Then the next you think, sitting there with a big smile on his face, fast asleep, and he wasn't. I mean, how was I to know? But that was one of the worst moments I've ever had in the theater, when somebody told me that, because up to that moment, you know, I'd been enjoying it, you'd been enjoying listening to it, the laughter was there, you can imagine the level we were all at, and then somebody says he's blind. So
I hate you now.
I know you do. Oh, boy. Well, that's killed it, hasn't it?
That's about all I have.
Yeah. No, that's the only instance I think I've ever had of someone not being evicted from a theater, but being evicted out of their seat.
Is this case still in the courts?
Oh, it'll be coming up soon. Please, I want to get it off the...
Had he left by then, or did you go out and find him, or anything?
We tried to find him, but no, I couldn't find him at all.
Suppose he's accustomed to that sort of thing happening? Yeah,
Can you put yourself in his position? What am I doing wrong? What has happened to me? He's suddenly on his back in the aisle. And he's enjoying it. He's loving the show.
That's got to be written into a play or a movie or something. That's quite something. Did you... what was I going to say? Did you ever try to... I don't know how to express this, is what it is. You came from a very small industrial town,
yes.
And you've had blazing success, spectacular success, and brings to mind Can You Go Home Again, you know, almost the...
No, the answer to that one is no. When you leave at the age of 16, as I did, the gulf becomes too wide. There's, you know, you just cannot go back to the home and hope to excite them with your dreams and ambitions, because it frightens them. It's another world that you're in. A world that you take for granted now is a world that is so beyond anything they ever dreamt of, and they are very comfortable talking to you about things of the town, the local football game, or Mr. Wilson and his sweet shop, and stories of the town. Make them feel comfortable. But
would they be self-conscious around you now and say, well, you're probably used to much fancier people than we, than...
yes, I've had that.
Yeah.
I've had that with the family. It's very difficult. I don't expect them to I've been brought up in show business. We have, you know, and we know exactly what it's like. We don't meet stars. We meet other people in the business. You
That's
know,
right.
we don't treat each other as any sort of celebrities. We just treat each other as friends when we meet. But to see the two of us together, a lot of people would back away. My brother would go crazy if he knew I was sitting here with you now. You know, it's wonderful.
That's all it takes to...
Yes, no, you know what? It's like he said, Jim, could you get me so-and-so's autograph? And I say, who's so-and-so? They said, oh, it's the guy in the television series that, and they think you know everybody in the business.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's nice to go back home because it brings you down to what it's all about, the reality.
Yeah.
I always comment on a story. Harry Seacombe had been introduced to the Queen and was boasting to his wife how great he'd been and how wonderful she was and how much laughter had come from the royal box. And his wife said, oh, that's great, go and get the coal in. He said,
Get the
sure.
coal.
And that's,
The comedian Harry Seacombe.
yeah, that brings him down to ground level.
Yeah.
And you need a family like that. You know, it's nice to go back home, but I cannot hope to talk to them about what I want to do and what I intend to do or what I have done.
Have you brought them to London to see you?
Oh, what, many
that kind of
times,
thing?
many
Yeah,
times. I did over the years. Now there's only my brother left, and he's
Yeah.
still starstruck. And it's wonderful. He brings an innocence to it all.
How old are you, Jim?
I'm 44 now.
Well, how old were you before you did that fall? Well, that was certain. No one will ever top that.
Oh,
yeah. And the fact that you're such a wonderful actor, besides, it's such a great mixture of gifts that you have.
I think it really comes from, and I love telling actors this, young actors, you know, they just think they should go down that path if they're in show business, and the answer is you shouldn't. You should take every branch that you can to learn a little bit about, learn every instrument on that factory floor, you know, and then you can become the manager, hopefully the president one day, you know. But, and that's what I've done.
You certainly have, and we're out of time again.
Oh, not again.
Thank you for showing us at least 23 of your sides.
Thank you, Dick. It's
Jim
been
Dale.
a pleasure.
Great.
Thank you very much.
See you tomorrow night. Good night.